Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is Wednesday, January 16th, 2013. I'm Darko. Alright, I'm going to just start it up right now. I'm going to cover mostly Mali in the first video because there's just a crap load of news on it. And we'll try to cut through all the BS, disinfo, propaganda that's being put out there by mainstream sources, basically trying to justify this recolonization of a certain part of Africa. So, in the name of humanitarianism, again, when really it has to do with resources. So we'll look at a little bit at the history of how it came to be, and you'll just see the same pattern going on and on again. French officials vow to keep troops in Mali until it is terror-free democracy. So they say somehow they figure this will take only a few weeks. French leaders insist they are determined to stay in Mali until the job is done, insisting that will mean safety, a nation totally free of terrorism, and a flourishing democracy to replace the military junta. So it says, if that sounds like a tall order for a war-torn African nations where the rebels hold 2/3 of the territory, it's because it is. That's not how French officials see it, however. They believe that the airstrikes have been hugely successful and believe the entire operation will take only a few weeks. The reality of the situation is that France has killed a lot of people, but rebels have taken even more territory since the war began, and even with African troops expected to start arriving next week, the occupation forces are likely to take months to train before they can match up to the large and increasingly well-armed rebel movement. And we have French triple their troops in Mali and prepare for assault. So it goes on here and it says that they failed to stop the advance of the Al-Qaeda-linked fighters. France announced Tuesday that it is tripling the number of troops deployed to Mali, strongly suggesting that French forces are preparing for a land assault to dislodge the extremists. The move reverses months of rhetoric in which France had said they would provide aerial and logistical support for a military intervention, but insisted it would need to be led by African troops. So it says here, Mali's Islamists united by invasion, once fighting one another. Islamist factions are now solid in resisting the French. Reports on the Islamists in the control of northern Mali, here's a map down here, you can check it out, often just label them all Al-Qaeda, but the reality of the situation is that in addition to the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb factions, several other independent Islamist factions, including MUJAO and Ansar Dine, have as much or more influence across the region. They have the same commonalities, but often have been at odds since taking over the north, in many cases clashing openly over the control of key areas. So it goes on here, it says Ansar Dine in particular, openly talked about severing all ties with the AFRICOM and backing elections in an effort to avoid war. Remember that, we were covering that just a few months ago. They were talking about peace and they were willing to sit down, negotiate something. Well, this is the key. This is the same thing that's happening in Syria. This is the same thing that's happening in Pakistan right now. It's outside forces basically trying to avoid elections. They're all about democracy, but they don't want elections, and they'll do whatever they can to create strife before the elections, actually, just like Venezuela, right? I saw an article just today. It said, what are we going to do with Venezuela's oil after Chavez? Well, it's the people of Venezuela's oil, so I guess whoever can really represent them like Chavez will decide that, right? But not foreign countries or corporations. But since France launched its invasion over this weekend, those differences and rivalries have dried up. Northern Mali is under attack from abroad, and the myriad fighters are now unified by a common enemy, the colonialists, right? Going back to this original article, France had said that they would provide originally aerial and logistical support only, but insisted it would need to be led by African troops. Then we have this. French action in Mali exposes absence of African neighbors and Western allies. After trying for months to organize an international coalition to intervene in Mali, i.e. basically attack the country and the people in it that are fighting for their own independence, I guess you could say, France has suddenly started the job on its own, with Western allies offering support only from a distance and Mali's African neighbors yet to show up on the battlefield. France is actually irked by minimal European aid in Mali war, courts Gulf nations and Africa for occupation forces. And I just covered, yesterday, the day before yesterday, about all the different countries lining up in the media to say how they support this. It says here, France's sudden invasion of Mali over the weekend was expected to come with a huge surge of international support to jump in the quagmire with them. It says here, EU and NATO member nations have indeed endorsed the war in theory, but most are reluctant to contribute anything more than bare minimum of support forces. This is from the 15th of January. It says West African troops to arrive in days. At least that's what they're saying. Troops from the regional West African force will be in Mali within days to help the French invasion. And it says here that this was confirmed by the force's commander of the West African military. Currently, France has 800 troops in the country and another 1,700 involved elsewhere. Nigeria will plan to provide 900 troops for the West African force, 300 more than previously announced. So we'll see how it plays out, but you know how it is. They're going to try to use, non-French people to go in there and fight these wars for them. So then we have Nigeria to send troops to Mali in the next 24 hours. So there you go. There's that. Key House Republicans push for a bigger U.S. role in Mali war. Says we should have France's back, says Representative Royce. So the Obama regime pledges for aid to the French invasion of Mali have been mostly vague, and while they talk escalation, outgoing Secretary of Defense Panetta has repeatedly ruled out ground troops. But the appetite for an ever-increasing U.S. role in this war seems to be considerable among key Republicans, or you can call them neocons or Zionists. Says here, with several leaders pushing for U.S. to commit broader military and logistic support to the conflict. One said that the U.S. always has to do what it takes unilaterally to protect our interests. Your interest? No, we all know who it is. So, military industrial complex internationalists who make a lot of money off killing and enslaving people. Panetta, no U.S. troops on the ground in Mali. So that's interesting because there are going to be troops all around Mali. We know that, right? The U.S. is sending troops to 35 nations under the guise of fighting al-Qaeda and related terrorists. So Democracy notes U.S. Army teams will be deploying as many as 35 African countries early next year for training purposes and other operations as part of an increased Pentagon role in the Africa, seeing small teams of troops dispatched, i.e. special forces, to countries with groups allegedly linked to al-Qaeda such as Libya, Sudan, Algeria, and Niger. So in summary, the war on terror spreads to Africa, and you can never win the war on terror, right? So it says here the U.S. may provide airlift for French Mali operations. This is from military.com. U.S. is already providing intelligence gathering assistance to the French in their assault on Islamist extremists in Mali. Panetta said they have not ruled out having American aircraft land in West African nation as part of future efforts to lend airlift and support. Well, when we get into this right now, we'll see that actually they helped create it. So, no, it's not going to be U.S. boots on the ground. They just help kind of foment it, and they provided logistics and like that in Syria, and then they stand back, and then France kind of does the hot war type stuff, it seems like, and and then Germany comes in and they give their tanks and their Patriot missiles and stuff. So next up we have Mali coup has U.S. interventionism written all over it. This is from March 26, 2012 when it occurred in Mali. The after effects of Libyan war and extensive training to the coup leader helped foment the toppling of the democratic Mali government. The Mali coup that took place last week in Mali, or really last March, is a monument to the consequences of U.S. interventionism, and the military junta now vying for control of the West African country threatens to roll back democracy and human rights for 15 million people living there. Well, many of them, thousands of them have already fled. Some background: rebel troops seized power and toppled the government in a bid to oust President Toure, who they claim insufficiently supported the military in a fight against the Tuareg militants waging an insurgency in the north. Toure himself came to power in 91 coup, but surprised many people when he handed power to a civilian government and was elected president in 2002. The mutinous troops that led the coup have imposed a national curfew, announced temporary suspension of the constitution, arrested political opponents, and taken control of basically the media. So it goes on here, it says already their reign is starkly contrasted with the widely acknowledged democratic record of the government they overthrew. Says U.S. foreign policy helped lay the groundwork for this coup. The after effects of the U.S.-led NATO war in Libya had a strong hand in fomenting the coup, and the coup leader, Captain Sanago, who received extensive training in the U.S. from 2004 to 2010. Says Gaddafi had hired and armed many Tuareg fighters to defend him against NATO-backed rebellion in Libya, and they returned to Mali at the Libya's war's end, stronger and determined than ever. The Malian army's frustration with President Toure for not arming them sufficiently to fight the Tuareg rebels reached a boiling point. It says the Libyan crisis didn't cause this coup, but certainly revealed the melee felt within the army. Mali, among many other nations, bore the brunt of the challenges that emerged as the result of the crisis, which was basically the regime change in Libya. Then you have it from the 24th of March last year, Mali coup led by US-AFRICOM captain. So as I've been expressing concern for the Tuareg for several months, the research that they uncovered was two parallel movements. One, a genuine uprising of the Tuareg, the other, an imperialist-backed initiative aimed at manufacturing consent, that's key, manufacturing consent for the takeover of another African nation and the genocide of the Tuareg rebels. Tuaregs that returned from Libya helping to defend Gaddafi and the Libyan people faced detainment in Mali. So US-AFRICOM's official confirmed on Friday, this is last year, mind you, the leader of the military coup d'etat in Mali has visited the U.S. on several occasions receiving professional military education. Talking about Senago. Foreign officers are handpicked for the program by U.S. embassies in respective countries. On March 22nd, just a month before the presidential election in Mali, Senago and soldiers loyal to him stormed the presidential palace in the capital, Bamako, and overthrew the president Toure. The reason for the rebellion was stated as the existing leadership relaxed attitudes towards the Tuareg tribes, insurrection in the northwest African country. We have military intervention in Mali as Western colonialism. This is from January 16th. And this is from New York-based political analyst Michael Burns. The military intervention in Mali by France and U.S. support for their incursion is another example. Western colonialism, it says another example of it hiding and masking itself in different garments. So France has launched an offensive against its former colony, bombarding cities, areas seized by anti-government fighters. He also referred to France and the French-led adventurism as a display of Western capitalism, which is a failure in every sense of the word. And this is from the 14th of January, and this is from the Guardian, London Guardian. The bombing of Mali highlights all the lessons of Western interventionism. The Western African nation becomes the 8th country in the last 4 years alone where Muslims are killed by the West. So here we go. Why the U.S. must help France save Mali. So this is from newser.com. If not, it will become a haven for terrorists, says Vicky Huddleston. Former ambassador, U.S. ambassador to the country, says it can't come too soon as far as France's attack. Helping France succeed is in our national interests, argues Vicky Huddleston in the New York Times. See, I told you back then that everything that they want to do in Africa now will be tied back to the Benghazi, right? The Benghazi attack, right? That nobody knows anything about. So they said the rebels in Mali have ties to the notorious Boko Haram group as well as Ansar al-Sharia, the militia thought to be behind the Benghazi attack that killed the ambassador Stephen, so we better go in there as justified. That's a problem with the people. A lot of people that read this, they don't know the actual history and they can't remember stuff from 6 months ago, a year ago. So then they basically forget that, technically morally they shouldn't have even supported the invasion and stuff like that in Libya. The same people that will support this in Mali are the same people that said Gaddafi was just an evil, brutal dictator, right? And they don't even look at their own government. They don't look at their own people. They just buy the rhetoric. U.S. We initiate terrorism to create terrorists to overthrow governments. This, of course, is Wesley Clark talking about how the U.S. had planned to overthrow 7 countries after 9/11, including Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. Says, therefore, the U.S. caused the war on terror as a policy choice. 9/11 was a pretense and not the cause. So the U.S. conducts acts of terrorism in nations they want to control. The U.S. That's why I always say, whenever you see, Al-Qaeda in the media, Al-Qaeda is popping up somewhere, that means that the U.S. wants to go there and basically get some kind of political control. The U.S. continues terrorism to provoke an act of reprisal. So they like those reprisals, those bombings like in Syria. The U.S. labels the reprisal terrorism to justify covert and overt military operations to overthrow targeted governments. Despite openly supporting self-styled jihadist revolutionaries seeking an Islamic theocracy in Syria and Libya before that, the new socialist French government is backing jihadists while they're bombing Mali to end jihadists and terrorism. So, interesting history. The Tuareg rebels were seeking independence from the central government, took advantage of the turmoil and established its own homeland, a long-time dream of the Tuareg people who have been oppressed by assorted North African despots for generations. This is GGN. I'm Darko. Thank you.